What's up, y'all? How's it going? Mike here. Welcome to Campaign Diaries, Episode 3, Session 3 recap. When we left off, our heroes, they had found themselves thrown into the Feywild and lost in a tiny sprite village called Feyravon. They were a little bit hungry, a little bit tired from spending so much time in the desert. So when they met these sprites, they offered them some of this milky blue nectar, and they said it would kind of revitalize them. So everyone except Mateo took a drink of this nectar and fell into a deep slumber where they gained the benefits of a long rest. Everyone in the party leveled up to level 3. And while Mateo was kind of sitting around, processing everything, gaining his surroundings, the head sprite came up to him and told him that him and his party have been summoned to have an audience with their village elder. Mateo wakes up the rest of the party and at this point notices that everyone's skin has turned blue from drinking this milky blue nectar. As the village elder approaches, this tiny sprite. He wears like a red cap mushroom hat, and his name is Spore. Well, it's not wise to drink a strange nectar from a strange people in a strange place. Mateo gets a permanent +1 to his wisdom score, total score, and everyone else takes a permanent -1 to their wisdom score. Don't take weird drinks from strangers, guys. This actually did have a benefit to it. Spore ends up explaining that there's many different portals that they could find to get back, but a lot of them are natural formations, and those can cause shifts in time if you use one of those. So you might use one of those portals and come out of the Feywild like 200 years later, or maybe 1 second's passed. So the party asks, is there a safe way? Is there a safe way to make a portal to get us back to the same time and place that we left? There is one person that may be able to help them, an old witch named Agnes. They're agents of the Feywild called the Equestrians, and they are like half horse, half human, think like a centaur. And their job is they're like the agents in the Matrix. They can sense the presence of any foreign object or creature that doesn't belong in the Fey, and they will hunt them down and destroy them. So that's what their vibe is. Spore tells the party that after using that plane shift field, they cause a huge disturbance in the magical energy of the plane, and the Equestrians will surely have sensed that, and they've got to be on their way, most likely right now. He then informs the party that the blue nectar that they drank will serve to mask their scent. That will last for a certain period of time. It'll eventually wear off, but Pax actually asks for the ingredients. He writes down the ingredients for the potion in case they do stumble across it during their journey. The party asks Spore how to find this witch, and he's giving them like these weird circular answers that don't really make sense. Like, if you think you're going the right way, then you must be. And if you think you're lost, then you're lost. Like, what? He does offer to give them a guide, someone who's native to the forest, who will assist them in finding this witch. Suddenly out of one of these trees, the bark on the tree starts to morph, and a tall elven woman comes out, and she's got bark and leaves for skin. And she introduces herself as Meadow and volunteers to guide them through the forest to this witch. Everyone rolls a perception check. We have another player, a guest player playing Meadow. And so everyone rolls a perception check, and Meadow is the only one who hears the sound of hoofs beating their way through the forest towards the village. Now, the party is pretty sure at this point that this is the Equestrians, using context clues and the name. So Spore tells them, you guys are really great, but unfortunately, as a denizen of the Fey, I cannot interfere with the Equestrians. They are older than the trees. They are the ancient protectors of the forest. So if they come here, I gotta give you up. So you should run. So that's what they do. They take off into the forest trying to be as stealthy as they can. Unfortunately, Pax and Gaston, they wear plate and chainmail armor, so anytime we're making stealth checks right now, they're getting disadvantage on those checks. Everyone gets decent rolls, but it's not quite high enough. These guys are on the prowl. They are searching, not passively. So they do sniff out, and they hear the sound of chains and plate kind of clunking along, and they turn, and you see these two tall, the body of a horse, and then where the horse's head should be is the torso of a human and the rest of a human. You know what a centaur is, right? Okay. They've got these big pikes. They've got all this cool Fey war paint, long braided hair, and these huge heavy composite bows on their backs. They're about 120 feet away, we discovered, and they start charging towards the party. And at this point, we roll initiative. So after rolling initiative, the party has two choices. They can either stand and fight, or they can try to run and just like try to get away. So they discuss this for a split second and decide, let's try to run. And if we can't outrun them, we're gonna try to stand and fight. We enter a skill challenge. They take off through the forest with Meadow. Meadow is with them, but not really guiding right now. They're just running for it. So they're going deeper and deeper into the Fey forest, which is a very dangerous and dark place if you get lost. Pax was the first one to go, and he used his athletics ability to leap over some fallen branches and like throw them in the path of the equestrians, and he gets a success. The next person up was Meadow. She attempted to charm the equestrians, but was unsuccessful. However, they did tell her that they had no qualms with her. She is a protector of the forest. They were like, basically, we have no problem with you. If you just stand aside, let us take care of this, there will be no issues. But Meadow keeps running with the party. We got one success, we got one failure. They need 5 successes before 3 failures. Gaston at this point, he sees they're closing in. And right when they get close enough to be within earshot, he turns around and casts command on them and yells, "Halt!" One of them fails their save, gets stopped in his tracks, and can't move for an entire round. Boom. Mark that up for another success. Mateo does a flourish of his hands and casts dancing light. A few balls of like just glowing light form in the air. He sends them off in another direction to try to distract the other equestrian, and is successful. So this guy, who's not halted at the moment, goes veering off into the forest chasing these lights. The other one breaks out of his command and starts charging towards the party again. We actually get down to 4 passes and 2 failures. So whoever goes next is going to be make or break for whether they need to stand or fight, or if they lose them. I forgot to mention we were down a player this session, so Billy Bob Jr. was not in the game. Whenever a player's out, we just kind of pretend that their character isn't there. It's just easier that way. They start running and they are coming up to a cliff. 30-foot straight drop cliff right in front of them. They all kind of skirt, do some dexterity checks to make sure they don't fly over, and Gaston turns around and casts command one more time. Tells this guy, "Halt!" And he fails. That's 3 failures. Now, they have this cliff behind them, and they have the equestrian charging towards them. He starts pulling out his bow and knocks these 2 thick arrows and just starts letting loose on the party. Now, Pax, having vampirism, begins scaling this wall. He has spider climb, so he can climb surfaces that a normal person couldn't climb without gear. He begins climbing down, and Mateo jumps onto his shoulders to ride down, but slips when he jumps on his shoulders and begins tumbling off the cliff. At the last moment, Gaston turns around and grabs him by the scruff of his collar and pulls him back on top. Mateo decides to try this again, while Gaston turns to hold off the equestrian that is charging them. Meadow, meanwhile, she starts to see that everyone's making their way down. She shifts into this tree and then comes out of another tree down on the forest floor at the bottom of the cliff. She has this ability that she can move through the trees. That's kind of how she moves through the forest usually. She makes it down. Mateo jumps back onto Pax's shoulders and sends his guiding lights. He's still controlling those lights that are distracting the other equestrian. And he sees down a bit of a ways that there's a portion of the cliff that like raises up higher and then the ground divots lower. So he guides the light towards this position and tries to trick this equestrian into jumping off, just falling off of the cliff. Unfortunately, the equestrian does, right as he gets to the edge of the cliff, like his hoofs just like right over the edge, and he passes his dex save and he is able to stay on top of the cliff. It's at this point that equestrian sees that this was all a ruse and turns and looks down the cliff a ways and sees the party, pulls out his bow. Now Gaston's been holding off this equestrian while the party begins to climb down the cliff's edge. As soon as he sees that the rest of the party's making their way down, he throws his shield and sword over his shoulders and turns to go start climbing down the cliff himself. Right as he is getting over the edge, the first equestrian that's been chasing catches up to him. So this equestrian comes up and Lion King style like slams Gaston's hands. He loses his grip on the wall and falls all 30 feet down and smashes on his back. A normal man would have died, but Gaston is still alive. He's got the wind knocked out of him, but he's okay. So he starts to gather himself and there's these two equestrians that are now shooting arrows down at them. It's at this point that Matteo unveils a new ability that he has just acquired. After hitting level 3, he's taken his subclass Echo Knight. He is able to split the timelines of the multiverse and create a second version of himself. And he summons this echo of himself up on top of the cliff and starts doing battle with the equestrian that's standing right above them. His echo is fighting this equestrian, and Matteo uses telekinetic shove. The dude loses his footing and tumbles over the cliff and smashes down on the ground, taking the full damage. Gaston's already getting back up, and he starts swinging his hammer around. And Gaston lands a heavy blow on this dude. The equestrian kind of turned up and looked at them. He knew that his time was coming. If you strike me down, we will only come back in greater number. Boom! Just domes him. And Gaston summons the divine energy of his chosen god, and his hammer just glows with this beautiful gold energy, and he just takes this thing apart and completely wipes him out. So this one's down. The other one's still taking shots though, starts running back and forth across the cliff's edge. He doesn't really have a way to get down, but he can see the party, and he's got a good higher ground on them. It's at this point that Meadow starts looking around and sees there's this large tree further away towards the swampy area, and she tells the party, let's all go hide behind this tree. Maybe we can get out of line of sight of this guy. They all move into this tree area where there's all this weird fungus growing and stuff. All these mushrooms are starting to grow in this swampy area. And they watch this equestrian who can no longer really get a good shot on them from where he's at. He kind of paces back and forth for a couple minutes, tells Meadow that she's betrayed the order of the Fae and that she will pay now too. And he rides off into the forest. So the party has successfully shaken their first encounter with the equestrians. And as they're hiding behind this tree, one of these little mushrooms explodes in a bunch of spores. Meadow inhales some, Matteo and Pax, they both inhale some, and suddenly they hear a little voice. It's are you gonna kill me? It's these little mushrooms that are talking to them. So they've been plugged into the fungal network. And after this happens, two large fungal entities known as myconids, they look like giant humans if humans were created out of mushrooms. They kind of rise up out of the swamp and start questioning the party. The party explains their case. These are pretty pacifistic people, but they feel that their little children are in danger. It's pretty clear that the party doesn't want to hurt them. They have a short back and forth, and Pax starts asking about where they can find the witch. Dude, it's just just go where your heart tells you to go, man. If you think you're going the right way, surely you must be going the right way. If you feel you are lost, surely you will never find your destination. Oh, it's the same deal. He's not getting any straight answers, but he basically tells him, you can go the short way or you can go the long way. Meadow says, hey, let's go the short way. It's more dangerous, but we'll get there much quicker. So they begin heading in the direction that Meadow decides is probably the way to go. Pax pulled back out the magic lamp and was like, hey, let's just use this. Let's pull out the lamp, let's rub it again, summon the genie, and we can ask him to take us back to where we came from or bring us to Serpent's Pass, which was the place that was discussed on that secret message back in session 1. So he pulls out the lamp and rubs it. Nothing happens. Now, the deal with this lamp is that it only can be summoned. The genie can only be summoned every 24 hours after it's been put in. So at this point, we were 4 hours into the Fae since they had put it back in. That blue nectar gave them a really quick, long rest, so they didn't do the full 8 hours. So it's only been a few hours, and there's no effect. So they're like, oh crap, we're stuck here for at least 24 hours. I guess let's just go. Meadow, which way do we go? They walk for a few hours, deeper and deeper into this thicker, darker, more mysterious forest, and eventually come to a trail that descends as the ground around it rises up into kind of down into a valley with trees going up on each side. and it's getting darker. And as they travel, the trees kind of start to bend in and create like a tunnel. And it's getting very dark, and eventually they come to a cave. Now, as they approach this cave, Pax and Gaston are kind of busy eating some rations because they've had a very long journey and they're very hungry. But Mateo's got his eye out, and he's noticing this strange webbing throughout the trees. It's like silvery and kind of blue and almost holographic, to where it clearly looks like spider web. It like flickers a little bit, almost in and out of existence. He's kind of noticing this, and he's like, okay, this is something that is able to phase in and out of this plane. So Mateo, having a decent understanding of the nature of magic, surmises that this material is phasing in and out of the plane that they're in, this webbing. So he clocks that there's like this big stone entrance, and inside it's just dark as night. Pax and Gaston, they finish up their rations, and Mateo, kind of points out the the spider situation. Gaston apparently has a pretty big fear of spiders. He's very apprehensive about going into this cave. But Meadow insists, we could turn back, but it's going to take a while, and this is the quickest way to get to the witch's lair. Pax is kind of like, let's just go in and just get through it as quick as possible. It's not stop, slow down. Let's just get through there. But they continue kind of like going back and forth, and Mateo decides to summon some more of his lights. This time he summons like a deep red orb that doesn't disturb the lighting too much, and he sends it off into the cave. And as he does, he sees like something on the ceiling and like disappears in the shadows. Everyone's pretty aware that there's a big spider in there at this point. If they want to get to Agnes, they're gonna have to go through here, or they have to turn all the way back. There's equestrians looking for them. It's a tough choice. They eventually do decide to go into the cave. So everybody lines up, and Mateo splits his lights into a bunch of different balls and kind of surrounds the party, and they begin creeping through the cave, trying to sneak as stealthily as possible. As they're walking, the floor is cold and damp, and there's like, when you touch the walls, your hand kind of sticks to like this slime, like this webby slime. And they notice there are these like egg sacs just littered all over like the walls and the floor of this cave. But they continue. And we roll stealth, and once again, the disadvantage of having heavy armor on comes to bite them, literally. A spider drops on them from above. It drops right on top of Pax, and the rest of the party, they continue trying to move forward through this cave as they're fighting this spider. Mateo is forming this chaos bolt into some element. Chaos bolts, you don't know what they're going to be until the moment you shoot them. He shoots it off in a blast of lightning, but misses. It shoots right past this spider and deeper into the cave. And as it does, it temporarily illuminates further into the cave, and the party sees 8 enormous eyeballs up on the ceiling. Fuck that. We're getting out of here. This spider that they're fighting right now is not even like the queen, like the mama spider. There's something bigger in there, and it's watching them fight this smaller, still very large spider. This thing was like the size of a small bear. Whatever is in there is much bigger than that. They once again have this quick decision, like, should we just go for it or should we turn around? Mateo did not get a long rest, so he's pretty much out of spells at this point, and the rest of the party's kind of hurt from the fight with the equestrians, so they decide to book it. They turn around and make a run for it, but when they do, Pax gets webbed. This smaller spider shoots webs down onto him and entraps him in a case of webbing. But Pax summons his echo and has his echo run out towards the mouth of the cave, and uses an ability which allows him to switch places with his echo. So he switches places with his echo. Gaston is cutting webs as they're charging out of the cave, and Meadow just like deftly, runs right out. Mateo turns, makes it out of the cave. They all get back to the entrance of the cave. They have retreated from this battle. Now they're standing right at the mouth of the cave, and it's almost the end of the night. So the party really, really, really wants to take a rest. So we're gonna set a DC. The idea is that we can have one person do a perception check, and it's going to be a higher DC, or 2 people both take 2 shifts and do perception checks throughout the night, and it'll be 2 points lower. We originally started with a 12 DC, and then I kind of explained what the options working against the party are. You've got this spider's cave. You've got the equestrians that are searching for you. There was one other thing. I forgot what it was. But there were 3 things, and that put the DC up to 15. Now I turn to the party and I say, all right, is there anything you can do to bring this DC back down? So we'll go around the table, and if you have a good enough reason or a good enough idea, we'll do that. And if you succeed, then it brings it down by 1 DC. Mateo, being the only one that didn't drink the nectar, is the only one whose scent is not masked by the equestrians. So Mateo goes to the forest floor and starts coating his body in like mud and leaves and dirt and stuff. Pretty smart. So we roll a survival check. He passes the DC, so that goes from 15 back down to 14. Pax begins building a shelter around them and blocking off the mouth of the cave, just taking sticks and stuff. Gaston and Meadow, they help and gather sticks, so he goes ahead and rolls with advantage. They succeed, goes back down to 13. They decided to let Meadow stay up and keep an eye out. She's gonna do a single roll. Rolls a 14. They pass. They get their long rest, and that's where we ended the session. The party is now at the mouth of the cave, fully rested, but the spiders in the cave are fully aware of their presence, and the equestrians are hunting them. So takeaways from this session. Skill challenges, really fun. This was the first skill challenge I've had where we were going into combat, and then we made the decision, the party made the decision to try to escape. And so we stayed in initiative, and we used a skill challenge to see whether or not combat would actually have to happen. It ended up happening, but we had a really cool chase scene in the meantime. I don't know, man. It's just a good old night of D&D, bruh. I liked the very end where they were trying to build shelter and lower the DC that had been set. It's kind of fun to be like, okay, you have this, and you have this working against you. So that raises the DC by this many points. And I'll tell, I don't use a DM screen or anything, so I'll tell the players what the DC is most of the time. And, that way, what you're trying to roll. And it's much more exciting to be like, okay, we got to get that 12. If you're more transparent with your rolls like that, I could say, okay, we're starting at 12. This is working against you. Now you're up to 15. Can you give me something that will bring that back down? So we can kind of have that back and forth, which is a lot of fun when you're rolling on something that big, because if they had failed that perception check, because it was all building towards that one check. And when you made that roll, that was a big roll because you had built a shelter. Mateo had covered himself in dirt to mask his scent. They had done all these things and succeeded just to get this DC to something they have to roll for. And if they had failed that roll, it would have all been for nothing. The equestrians would have found them. The spider would have come out of the cave. But because they passed it, Meadow did not perceive anything happening throughout the night, and they got their long rest in. They're now fully rested and ready to go. Hopefully we'll have Billy Bob Jr. back next week, and we'll see if our party can make it to the witch's lair. All right, y'all. Well, thanks for tuning in. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I will see you guys next time with the next campaign recap. Thanks for tuning in for session 3, and peace.